BBC News with Sue Montgomery. The Ukrainian government says that not a single civilian was able to leave the besieged city of Mariupol on Thursday, accusing Russian forces of again violating a temporary ceasefire to allow evacuations. President Volodymyr Zelensky said efforts to take food, water and medicine into the city also failed when Russian tanks attacked a humanitarian convoy. The Ukrainian MP, Yaroslav Zhelezniak, said the situation in the city was grim.
My sister, now in Mariupol, I spoke with her 2 days for 1 minute because there is no mobile connection, there is no water, there is no food, there is no electricity, and the connection was so bad, so I spoke just 1 minute, and after that I lost the connection. And now the situation is very horrible. We have 1,300 deaths among civilians who have been killed by bombing in Mariupol. There is no way to get out from here. 3 times we tried to organize a corridor for evacuation, and 3 times it was shooting not only in militaries but in this humanitarian transport.
The United Nations nuclear watchdog, the International Atomic Energy Agency, says the Ukrainian authorities have informed it that they've lost all communications with the radioactive waste facilities at Chernobyl. With more details, Bethany Bell.
The head of the IAEA, Rafael Grossi, said the agency was aware of reports that power had now been restored to the site and was seeking confirmation. Chernobyl, which was the scene of the world's worst nuclear accident in 1986, is no longer a working power station, but needs constant management. Speaking after separate talks with the Ukrainian and Russian foreign ministers, Mr. Grossi said he was preparing ideas on how to ensure the safety of nuclear sites in Ukraine.
Security experts in the airline industry have expressed concern that surface-to-air missiles in Ukraine could end up in the wrong hands. Several Western countries are supplying Ukrainian forces with shoulder-launched missiles to help them resist the Russian invasion. Frank Gardner reports.
The Starstreak missile system, which the Defence Secretary announced this week may soon be sent to Ukraine, is one of the fastest and most sophisticated means of bringing down an aircraft in flight. It's part of a package of military support for Ukraine, now under consideration as it battles to fend off the Russian advance. But airline safety analysts are more concerned about Ukraine's ageing stock of Soviet-designed SAM-7 and other missiles, which, amid the chaos of war, they fear could end up in the hands of organised criminals.
Diplomats at the UN Security Council say they'll meet on Friday at the request of Russia, when they're expected to discuss claims by Moscow that the United States is involved in biological warfare programs in Ukraine. The US has dismissed the Russian allegations. BBC News. The US-based Walt Disney Company has become the latest business to end operations in Russia after announcing a pause to its businesses in the country. Goldman Sachs has also announced that it's pulling out of Russia, the first major US bank to do so. In other news, doctors in Sudan say 2 people have been shot dead as protests continue against military rule. Since last year's coup, at least 87 people have been killed and hundreds wounded. UN and African Union officials have warned that the country is in grave danger. Here's our Africa editor, Will Ross.
It's clear that in Sudan there's an overwhelming desire for the military to leave power. The protests since October's coup have been relentless, but the army chief, Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, and his senior colleagues appear determined to stay in charge, and so protesters are facing bullets on the streets. An AU envoy has called for a resumption of the transition to civilian rule. Mohamed Labat urged civilian factions to iron out their differences and seek a consensus. He warned that if they remained split, power would stay with the Sudanese military.
The Supreme Court of Cuba says 12 people who took part in anti-government protests last July have received jail sentences of between 5 and 16 years. The court said the defendants were tried in a military court in December and were found guilty of charges including sabotage, robbery, intimidation and vandalism in the city of Cardenas. One other defendant was acquitted. The United States says recent rocket launches by North Korea mark a serious escalation in its missile testing program that will trigger more sanctions by Washington. North Korea says the launches were tests focused on developing a reconnaissance satellite, but the State Department said North Korea was testing elements of what it called a relatively new intercontinental ballistic missile system. BBC News.